for this. Just realized you probably didn't hear most of that because the audio was not on. But let me start that over slightly. My name is Daniel Martin. Welcome to an ASLA Ask Me Anything event. Today's event is slightly different in that we are welcoming a panel of visitors instead of just a single person like normal. And we're also going to be covering a particular topic. Today, we are going to be talking about the ASLA Student Awards. This is a great program that allows the student members and the students in landscape architecture to be able to submit their student work for opportunities to win awards and prizes and all kinds of great things that you're going to learn about today. So welcome, and without further ado, we're going to introduce our panelists to you so that you can be familiar with who's going to be talking to you today. So right off the bat, I want to welcome someone very special from ASLA. She is on staff at ASLA, and it is her responsibility to oversee the student awards. So let's welcome Makia Hazelton. Makia, thanks for joining us.
Hi, thanks so much, Daniel, for having us, or having me today. So my name is Makia Hazelton. I am the Honors and Awards Coordinator here at ASLA, and my responsibility is to oversee the awards program. And in particular, today, we're talking about the student awards, so overseeing the student awards program.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Makia. And Makia is here. She'll know all of the technical, important information about the awards. So hopefully she can handle those questions for us. Let's see, we also have with us today Mr. Roberto Rivera. And Roberto is sitting with us today because he has been a judge on the Student Awards, and he's going to provide kind of that judge's perspective for us. Roberto, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Daniel, and welcome everybody. It's a great pleasure to be with you today. I'm Roberto Rivera, as Daniel mentioned. I'm an associate professor at Florida International University's Landscape Architecture program, former chair of the program, and I'm also principal of my Studio Roberto Rivera here in Miami Beach. And just as a preface, I mean, I think that if you're tuning in, you probably recognize the value and the exciting sort of aspects of student awards and what it can mean. To me, as chair last year, was really a highlight of my year because I mean, I've been both on the faculty side as an advisor to students and as a juror as well. But it's really an opportunity to see the best work, and every year I think surprises us in really good ways, and it was par for the course last year. So looking forward to seeing new applicants and new work this year as well, and in this round.
Great, thank you, Roberto. And that's a good point you bring up, that you also bring that faculty perspective. So if people have questions about how their faculty can help or things that faculty can do, that's going to be important too. All right, now I'm going to introduce our next two guests. We have a couple real winners with us here today, so this is very exciting. Our first, these are student guests who have previously won awards, so they're going to provide a unique perspective from the student side and things that they did that they believe maybe helped them chalk up that win. So first, let's welcome Nathania Martinez. Nathania, welcome.
Thanks, Daniel. Hi, everyone. My name is Nathania Martinez. I graduated from the BLA program at the University of Florida last May, so 2018, and submitted for the 2018 National ASLA Awards a group project of 30 plus people. So if you're dealing with group projects, I can ask any questions related to that. On the multi-sensory community garden at a high school dormitory in Rijeka, Croatia. And I worked with Daniel Winterbottom at the University of Washington, who's advisor and director of the design build program that was in charge of putting this project together.
All right, thank you. And our last guest, another student winner, we have Nicole Rivera Ramos with us. Nicole, welcome.
Hi, Daniel. Thank you for having me. I'm Nicole Rivera, and I graduated last May of 2019 from the State University of New York in Syracuse, SUNY ESF. And I submitted my capstone project, which was obviously by myself, and to the awards, and it was called El Retorno a la Tierra, and it was a project down in Puerto Rico about empowering communities on producing their own food. And I submitted for the planning and analysis category, and it won an excellence award.
All right. So there you have it. There is our panel. I want to make sure all of our viewers know that you can use the comment section in this Facebook Live post to ask any questions you would like of our viewers, and we will get to as many of your questions as we possibly can. So anything at all you would like to ask, just type it in the comments and we will get to it. In the meantime, while we're waiting for some of you guys to chime in, I'm just going to ask a few questions from our panelists to get us started. Let's start with Nathania. How did you first hear about the ASLA Student Awards, and what made you then want to submit and take part?
Well, I've always heard of the ASLA student, or as long as I've been a student, I've heard of the student ASLA national and then state level award submissions. And I had never tried to submit to the national category before. Maybe I just didn't have the courage. But with this group project, saw the opportunity to really put forward a project that we all thought could merit something. So that's how that got started.
Is it advertised or broadcast like around your studio at University of Florida, or it's just kind of a known thing?
I think some of the faculty would sometimes push for submission. And then also through our student chapter, we advocated a lot for students to, at the end of the year, start to think about submitting either for the state or national level, and we would try to put together workshops and for portfolio building, but also for student submissions, which sort of like a solidarity way to do it.
All right. And Roberto, at FIU, it sounds like sometimes the faculty is encouraging the students to submit. What does FIU do from the faculty side to help students along in submitting?
Yeah, well, I've always been a big believer in awards programs like ASLA's because even if students don't necessarily feel like they're ready, every time it just gets them that much closer, even if they're not, awarded. So I always encourage students, no matter how confident they are or not, to submit. And as chair, I took that seriously because it's also an opportunity to make our community know at large the kind of work that we do. So I started a position. I asked one of our faculty to be basically a coordinator that would gather opportunities for awards and collect these with background information and deadlines, and go through examples so that students who are coming into the program know what the standards are in terms of what kind of work is recognized as being of excellence and merit. And we go through these workshops. I think that Nathania mentioned. I think we do a couple of workshops just to communicate that. I went so far a couple of times to encourage other faculty and in my courses as well. Generally, the more advanced studios requiring students to submit to the awards at the end of their coursework. Generally, I did it in the more advanced studios just because they're a little overwhelmed early on, but some of them did anyway. So it's a really important part of what we do and what we've done in the program.
All right. Now, just a little about the awards. There are multiple categories that you can apply for. So there's different categories with different awards. Some of the categories, 7 of them, there are general design, residential design, analysis and planning, research, communications. Um, let's go to Nicole. You said you submitted your capstone project that you were working on. Which category was that in when you submitted?
I submitted my capstone for the analysis and planning category.
Analysis and planning.
And yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your project.
So my project was it was very challenging, I have to say, because this project I started developing it by August, and then Hurricane Maria impacted Puerto Rico. So basically I had to restart my project. And so the idea of the project was to provide opportunities for the communities to produce their own food and be self-sufficient. And, some of the problems that were happening on the island before, but obviously after the hurricane, they were more evident. So that was what El Retorno a la Tierra was about. And also, I took a perspective from a planning instead of just, looking at it at a bigger scale. How can we, impact and provide a plan or some ideas to start the conversation, and in Puerto Rico, it wasn't about providing a perfect solution. It was more about starting conversations there for improving the self-sufficiency and food production in Puerto Rico, because they import most of their food.
Right. And am I correct that you won an award of excellence for that submission?
Yes. So, as I mentioned, it was very challenging, and by the end of the year, my professors encouraged me to submit it to the ASLA Awards. They thought it was a good project. So I wasn't sure, but I know, like Roberto mentioned, sometimes we're a little bit worried, but the faculty then comes in and they encourage us, you can do it, just apply and see what happens. So that's what I did. And then, I got an email saying I won an excellence award, and it was very, I think it was something very amazing. I think that it was a great opportunity, and I think every student should go, because you're like, my work, has been recognized, and you feel like, I think like it empowers you as a student, because you think like, I can do the things that I like, that interest me as a landscape architect, and be recognized for it.
All right, that's great. So you weren't so sure. Your faculty said, "Yeah, you've got something here." You were not so sure, but then you come away with an award of excellence. So I think that should be an encouragement to some of our viewers who might be thinking, I don't know if my work is quite there. Yeah. Take a shot, because believe in yourself. Take that shot and submit, and who knows. And so there are two levels of winners, if I'm correct here, Makia. There's the Award of Excellence level, and then an Honor Award winner. And there are pretty phenomenal prizes that come with this. You want to talk about that, Makia? We'll bring you in and let you talk about kind of the award levels and what you get.
Sure, I would love to. So yeah, there are two levels of winners. The one is an award of excellence for each of the categories. And there could be any number of winners for that category determined by the jury that year. The next level in that particular category is the award of excellence. So as Nicole was mentioning, she was an award of excellence winner in the analysis and planning. And there's usually, there's only can be one, there only can be one winner for that particular award. And that award is extremely special, because that person gets to have all their expenses paid to the annual meeting, which is huge. So we're talking registration and travel, and we take care of everything. But also the honor award winners, if you're a team project or an individual, one person from each of those projects also gets the registration paid for. So this is quite special, I think, and unique to the student award program.
So if you're a student that is, considering submitting a project, I would highly encourage that. One, at any award level, you're gaining something fantastic to put on a resume and to make yourself more attractive to potential employers, et cetera, et cetera. But if you win that big award this year, all expense paid trip to San Diego. That's that's a good deal. So highly encourage you to jump in on that. Let's go to Nathania again. Tell us a little bit. You were on a big group project of 30 people, which is a huge project. But talk a little bit about that submission process and what that was like, actually submitting your project for the awards.
Yes, of course. It was I gotta say, it was a big challenge. Mostly because a lot of the students that were in the program for the design build were in their final year, and university emails only last so long. So communication, being able to communicate with everyone became a little bit of an issue because I didn't have everyone's personal emails. And I'll add that the way, how I got to submitting, being the one to submit the project was a very impromptu. The year before at the national conference before in LA, I ran into Daniel Winterbottom and he just said, "Hey, we should submit this. You want to do it?" I said, "Yeah." So then a couple months later, that's when we were working on that together. And the first thing we did was try to communicate to 30 plus people that we're doing this. If you want to be a part of it in any way, let me know. Also, if it's like crowdsourcing images, crowdsourcing narrative, all of this. I will say that for a group project that large, and I'm not sure that that is very common size for a group, but communication was very important. It was actually very vital. And had we taken the precaution of, like getting everybody's personal emails before we finished the program, that would have probably helped a ton. And then also being cognizant as the person submitting the project, that I found at some point that a lot of the attention was being put towards me and having to correct. It's a group project, it's 30 people, but and a lot of work does go into it, to the process itself of getting your submission together, the narrative, the images, how they pair together. But it was very fun and fulfilling, and to be able to say that facilitated a submission that so many people benefit from, because it's not just the students, but also the community now that has their community garden recognized as well, that they can be proud of. And it was a very fulfilling project all the way around, the submission process and the project itself as well.
All right. Makia, do you have to be a member of ASLA, like a student member or associate member, to be able to submit for an award?
Yeah, this is sort of a tricky question. So the answer is no. However, you need to be eligible to become a member in those categories. So that means if you're based in the US and attending an LA program, you should be coming from an accredited program. However, we do have applicants outside the US, and those programs, because we don't have a governing body that accredits, they don't have the same requirement as students in the US, but you still should be eligible to be a member with ASLA, yes.
All right. And you can submit as many projects as you want in a single year, or are you limited to one entry?
No, you can definitely submit as many projects as you would like. Oftentimes, your chances of winning in a different category than you would have if you submit only to one are much greater. And often students find that projects can fit into several different categories.
All right. All right. Roberto, we're going to hop back to you here. Tell us a little bit about the judging process. What's that like? You show up in a room and have a stack of papers that you go through and grade. How does it work for you on the judging side?
Well, fortunately, I think we've advanced from the from the paper, but no, it's actually a process that's quite intense, to be honest. This last jury, I think we were a total of 9 jurors, and I think ASLA does a really good job of getting a cross-section of representation from practice, from research, from academia. And so it happens over the course of several days. It's not something that, we go in and a few hours later we have a winner. There's an intense amount of debate, which I find to be the most rewarding aspect being a juror and the kinds of conversations that you have and true and honest debate with some very, very distinguished panel members. So, you know, and I think that goes hand in hand with the recommendation that, you know, just having great, you know, things here and there, like, you know, an image or two, or is never enough. I mean, we really probe into the submissions, especially when it comes down to a handful of finalists. There's you know, a lot of competition, and so when it comes down to the brass tacks, we really dig in and split hairs and look at how something is written. So it's connected to the advice that you should look at this as an opportunity to get better at all aspects of project conception. And just because you finished a project, I know you probably are exhausted by the time you're done with any studio project, but the awards give you an opportunity to really you know, develop things a little bit further, and often that's what it takes. You know, that one section that you didn't quite get to, a site plan that needed some TLC, a model that you didn't quite finish. I know it sounds like more work, and it often is, but it's really, I think, worthwhile, and it's evident in the submissions that win that a lot of effort has gone into presenting it in such a way that things are clear. And it's a lot of information too. I think that the juries have hundreds of submissions to go through. And we can talk about some of the practical strategies. I'd be happy to cover that, but in general, et cetera, through that.
One teams, and what are maybe some
right research, if you're the great library that recognizing the consistencies that you can count on, and you will only know those insights if you spend the time, which can be quite fun and enlightening to see how the same issue is treated by different students in different groups. So that's a practical, I think, hopefully obvious thing, that you need to research the awards themselves. The other thing I would recommend that you research is the jury. You know, we had the advantage of having a very diverse group of people working in projects of different scales, different interests. And just, again, I think that putting yourselves in their shoes, and it might be helpful. Not that you want to, you know, I would discourage you from kind of pandering to any particular juror or style or anything like that. But it's important to know who your audience is. In terms of very practical, you know, things, you know, get people who are unfamiliar with your project to read through as much as you can. They will catch things that you have taken for granted, spelling, little things that are, you know, going to make your submission lose out at the last minute because you didn't look at those details. Inconsistencies between, you know, plans and sections, things like that. Just spend the time to review it yourself, but also get some help. I'm sure your faculty would be happy to review your narrative, your imagery, give you recommendations, what you might think is a great example of a page or whatever. Maybe they know of another example in your work that they think is extremely important that you have overlooked. So get that feedback early. And then another practical example or practical recommendation is, you know, graphics are so important. The visual content is extremely important, especially when you're going through hundreds of submissions, like inevitably any awards venue these days. So you want to really emphasize like your key image at the beginning. I think should be your strongest image. And your second strongest image should probably be at the end. I make this suggestion often to you know, students that I advise or applicants. You know, I do portfolio reviews every now and then, and you want to start off with the best impression and end with, you know, the second best impression. And you know, it's a limited real estate that you have, so choose your images wisely. Just because you know that you spent, you labored over hours and hours and hours doing one particular image. It does not necessarily mean that you have to include that work. And I think some mistakes in the juries that I've been a part of is that just because the work was done, especially when there's a lot of folks involved, everybody wants to have everything in there. And it often cancels itself out. It ends up getting in the way of a larger message. So you need to, this is an important lesson, I think, professionally as well, that you need to be a very, very good critical editor of yourself and put your hat as an objective observer. And does something tell a story? Does something really get the point across? And don't be afraid to take things out that you might think are absolutely imperative. Maybe they're not, and you will only know that by being critical, being objective, and consulting with other folks who have some experience in it.
All right. We have a question from the audience. I know that our two student guests were kind of in their last year when they submitted, and Roberto alluded to this a little earlier, that typically the people who are submitting are little, in their upper years of school, not just new students. But is there, the question from the audience, how early in the program can students submit work? Makia, you want to cover that? I guess anyone who's eligible as a student can, correct?
That is correct. That is correct. Technically, anyone who's eligible can, but from past experience, what we've noticed would be at least in your second year, you could possibly submit, especially if you're doing a group project or collaboration. But typically, students in their junior and senior year, if they're an undergrad, or of course, if you're a master's student submitting work, any of those times would probably work as well. But you're eligible anytime. So, yes.
Okay, perfect.
Can I say something quickly? And you should. I mean, as early as you can, like your first year, you should, because learn to develop what I call like an improvement mindset. Again, you might not win, but you're going to get better only if you submit.
Right. This is a question just came up for me after that, and then we'll get to some more audience questions. But do the submitters, do the students receive comments back from the judges?
I can answer that question. So yes, in many cases, yes. However, it's difficult for the judges, the jurors, to provide comments for every applicant because we receive hundreds and hundreds, and that's really labor intensive and time intensive. But when possible, absolutely, there's feedback that's given if your entry was not selected for that year.
Okay. And another question from the audience: can award winners submit again a following year? So we established you can submit multiple years in a row, but even if you win?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So if they're asking if they can submit the same project again if they won, that would be a no. But if they won in the previous year and they want to submit again, yes, absolutely. There have been students that have been successful in doing that, actually, submitting every year they're in the program.
Okay, perfect. Let's see, Roberto is another audience question that I think will probably be for you. This person is submitting an entry heavily based on scientific research, and as part of the research, she was looking at precedent projects that use the same processes. She says she'd like to include a slide about the precedents and citing them, of course, but she's hesitant to mention projects or products that she didn't partake in designing that she's only referencing. So she's looking for an opinion on whether those slides would be okay to include, would be helpful maybe for jurors, or more confusing for jurors.
Without knowing all the details, my initial feedback would be to avoid that, because it opens the door for confusion as to the involvement. That's not to say that that could be an important part of your submission as a reference, as a footnote, as something that you mention in your narrative with a link or But it really should be secondary, and it should be subordinate to everything else that you're submitting, which should be your own work and needs to be. Yes, frame, if it's an important part of the framing the issue, you can mention it, but I would not go very deep into including, imagery or anything that somebody who looks at this very quickly might think is yours. Because even if it's completely above board and clear in the way that you're phrasing it, it might be something that trips you up in a further down the line in the jury process. Like, oh, I picked that one because I thought this was part of the submission, but it isn't. And then it's a big letdown, and it kind of opens you up for vulnerabilities in terms of, well, is it really, did we jury it because of that or because of the original work? So I would steer clear of that for that reason.
All right, helpful, thank you. I'm going to throw one to Nicole. Roberto was talking about, making sure that you have different eyes on your project before you submit, even things from typos and things like that. How was that process for you, working with faculty or other people to proof for you?
I'm glad that you asked that question because I had a very particular process on that. So I was working with two faculty members. I had Martin Hogg and Matthew Pottiger, and we were meeting on a week. Every week we will meet once a week, and we will discuss my project, and they will make sure everything was fine. They were very critical about my graphics. I think they were both on two different sides. So one of them was pushing very hard my graphics, making sure everything was the best way it could. And then the other one was more into my narrative, which was very important. And also, I have to mention that English is not my first language. So my first language is Spanish. So I always have to make sure when I'm writing that, I have two of my faculties to check. Even I have some other people or peers to double check just to make sure that I don't have, any mistakes. And I think that's very important. Also, Roberto mentioned that you have to summarize your project. My project was a capstone, so I had a lot of information and a lot of graphics that I didn't include in my submittal because it would be too much or they were not, as strong as some of the other graphics. So it's kind of, and then my two faculty members helped me, in making that submittal more clear. And I think that's very important, to have somebody looking at what you're doing and being very critical, and also trying to be the most objective that you can be, and also yourself being critical with your work and saying, no, this works, this doesn't work. And at the end, show it to your faculty again and make sure everything is clear. And I think that will be my advice.
All right, thank you. Got another question. This is probably going to be for you, Makia. Are the award winners featured in any way during the annual conference or in LAM and the website? So besides winning your award, what other kind of, where can people go and see these award winners and learn more about the projects?
Yeah, this is an excellent question. So first, yes, you are featured in many places. The first place would be our website. We have an awards website that features both the professional award winners for that year and the student award winners. You can go to our website now and check that out and look at past winners. The second would be our landscape magazine. So LAM basically has a special awards issue that comes out to announce the winners. And this is a really huge deal. So the professionals are in this as well as the student award winners and their projects. Last year, a student award winner was actually graced with the cover of LAM, which is huge, and that doesn't often happen. So, if your work is great, that could happen for you. And lastly, students have an opportunity during our expo, this year, our conference on landscape architecture, to actually participate in a quick 10-minute session on the expo floor where they're presenting about their project. And this is a really wonderful opportunity I believe Roberto and other jury members and guests will stop by and listen to you give a presentation about your project and also offer some questions. And this is a wonderful opportunity for you to showcase your work. So many opportunities to have your name and work in university or school that you represent out there.
All right. Nothing looks better on the portfolio than your work on the cover of Landscape Architecture magazine. That's that's pretty great. So we mentioned that obviously we just covered again some of the places where you can see the work, and good insider tip if you're looking to submit a project, go look at previous winners and see kind of any common threads that you might find that you want to include or scope your work around to match those winning projects, see what's working for the winners. But earlier we mentioned one of the other things you get if you win is sort of this trip to the annual meeting, which is now the Conference on Landscape Architecture. Nathania, you were an honor award winner. You got to go to the conference with registration paid. Talk a little bit about the conference and how important that is and what you got out of that experience.
Yeah, the ASLA conferences, I had been to very many state conferences during my undergraduate degree, and I had volunteered, but going to a national ASLA conference is like a different caliber conference and expo. There's a lot going on at the conference. There's so many academic sessions, and then you have all the awards that are being recognized. You have that marvelous awards ceremony where both students and professionals are being recognized as well. So that's another reason to be featured. But the conference itself is a great way to enrich in an intellectual manner. Also a way to sort of, communicate some of your ideas. You need a lot of people. It's a great networking opportunity. So as a student, to be able to go at the onset of your career and meet a bunch of people with so many different ideas and like ways of expressing landscape architectural work, I gotta say it's one of the experiences that are pretty unparalleled in my undergraduate experience in studying landscape architecture. The conference itself is, I would say, almost unmissable. And then having your registration covered, I mean, as a student, that is like heaven sent. And I can understand how it's very difficult. I know that if I didn't have registration covered, I probably wouldn't make it to the conference. So using the student award submission as a way not only to get your work recognized, but also as like a medium to get to the conference also is a good opportunity.
All right, Nicole, same for you. You were Award of Excellence winner, so you got the all expense paid trip, but what were the highlights of the conference for you and what did you get out of that experience?
So as Nathania mentioned, I think it was amazing having the opportunity to go to the conference and having everything paid. And for me, I think the networking experience, meeting other landscape architects, meeting other students that were also winners, and then you can learn more about their projects, seeing them presenting. I think that was an amazing and invaluable experience for me. But also I want to highlight and Makia, you can correct me on this, because we went to the ASLA Council of Fellows Investor Dinner, and I'm not sure if is it all the students or just the Excellence Award? Just the Excellence? Okay. So I think that was a very inspiring experience for me as a student, because so we went to the Fellows Investor Dinner and seeing all these great landscape architects being recognized for, how many 20 years of work or 10 years of work. It was very amazing and inspiring, because you're like, I want to be there one day too. So I think that it's an experience that I think it's very important for any student, and I think any student would highly appreciate it, as they're starting their career as a landscape architect.
All right, thank you. Makia, for you, Nicole mentioned earlier, English is her second language, and that brings to mind, are these awards limited to only students in the U.S., or can students from around the world participate?
So students from around the world can participate. It's a global competition, and we definitely get all kinds of applicants from anywhere from, of course, the U.S., Canada, China, Thailand, all over. Yeah.
All right. And Roberto, when you're judging, do you know whose work you're judging, or is it all done anonymously?
It's all done anonymously, and it's a big part of it. So there's no bias. In fact, it's inevitable sometimes that the folks who jury are involved in any number of activities. So before the process, there's a vetting, a conflict of interest disclosure that's done to make sure that there is no bias, or everything is really transparent in that regard. But it's anonymously juried until the very end, when I don't think we even knew who won until after we left the session. So we found out after the students found out, I believe.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about when these things are due, Makia, and obviously we've had it up on the screen, Friday, May 17th, I think, at 11:59 p.m. But what does the student need to do to submit? Where do they go? What's that process look like for them?
Sure. So we have an online submission process, and there are two steps. First, paying your entry fee, and we have an entry fee deadline, which is May 10th, on a Friday for this year. So once you do that, then you have access to the other steps or tasks that need to be completed to submit your entry. All of this information is found through our website on ASLA.org. And going there to the awards page, and I'm sure we'll post this somewhere, will take you to the site where you actually submit your submission. And so everything, the date for May 17th is when everything needs to be completed. So that means your narrative, your project statement, your images, everything should be uploaded and ready to go and finalized by the 17th at 11:59 p.m. That's a pretty strict deadline.
All right, perfect. I just put the site up on the screen for where they need to go on the ASLA website to get that done. We did have a question which we sort of covered earlier. Do you have to be an ASLA member to submit? So the roundabout answer to that was no, you don't. But what's great is that if you're not, when you submit, you pay the non-member rate, and that rate gets you a year of membership. So if you're not a member, you will become one, which is a good thing. All right, so we are cruising here. We've got about 13 minutes left. I'm going to give each of you we'll start. Does anybody have anything they want to add or talk about in this experience that we haven't covered yet? Roberto, Nicole, or Nathania?
I'll throw out a few more friendly advice,
Yep.
hopefully something that will help you get over the edge. But and this is something that I emphasize with my students, and I think professional. I mean, we could all learn from how you need to present a lot of complex information in as few moves as possible, which means that you have to be very strategic about how you pare down. I know that you might have you might feel inclined to include everything that you wrote about something, but again, like Nicole was saying, it's about condensing, editing, getting to the essence. And something that goes a long way is, because a lot of the submission is, drawings, captions are extremely important. Captions allow you to elaborate on a detail that you might not catch as a juror in a narrative. So be descriptive with your captions. Don't just say, section AA, much less informative as section through a, brownfield restoration, whatever. So whatever you need to get communicated, be critical about how and where you do that. And captions are often a very valuable tool that can be discreetly inserted in your submissions. The other thing is typography, graphic design, extremely important. And this is something that you can learn from past submissions to ASLA awards or really to any award. It's just typography plays such a key role in how things are cohesively presented. So I'm sure your faculty tell you this, but it's really important to underscore. Just because you have 3,000 fonts available to you doesn't mean that you have to use 2,900 of them. I know you know this, but be very conscious about how you use typography and have a consistent look for that. It just makes your message feel less cluttered. And I think finally, some of the submissions last year I think fell into this category. There was a balance of work. You had multiple scales represented. A lot of the projects were very large, but not always. I mean, generally for analysis and planning, yes, but some of the submissions had models, physical models, and images of those. If those are a part of your process, make sure that you include the best versions of those. Don't throw in every single picture you took, but again, build a narrative that captures the attention, because it's the kind of thing also that you might find brings you to the surface, because if that's how you're conveying your message and nobody else is doing that, you will be remembered as, oh, that's the student who portrayed X via this really interesting hybrid digital model or whatnot. So don't discount that. I know that we have better and better tools every year to communicate digitally, but really it's a holistic process. At least the winning projects, I think, go a long way towards looking at issues holistically. So they present things in multiple scales, multiple media, just as a cohesive narrative.
All right. Nathania, is there any advice you would give to someone who's looking to apply or submit a project for this year?
Yes. As an eternal student myself, I want to offer some moral support. So we're at a time, especially now, I know that people are going crazy downstairs. I'm right here in the studios, where it seems a little stressful to put together some of these submissions. And sometimes we just want to take what we have and pile it in and submit it as is, or we're just not feeling like our project is quite there and kind of discouraged to do it. I want to say, take time to just reflect on all the work that you have done, because it's marvelous work. You poured your heart, soul, and sometimes blood on it. And all the projects I'm sure that Roberto and all the other judges see are very different and of a myriad amount of value. And just thinking about what you want to communicate and how you communicate, and just being very thoughtful and careful about it as well is probably some of the advice that I would give. But also, just one of the hardest and easiest things to do is to just go to someone and say, hey, what do you think about this? And it's hard because sometimes we don't have, again, we lack the courage or something, or we think the project is not quite there or something. Just do it. And sometimes you'll be so surprised the feedback that you get. Sometimes it takes you so much further. I love how Nicole was meeting with her professors every single week, and one was helping her with one side of it and one was helping with the other. And even though at the time it probably seemed like two very different, like getting pulled here and there, it probably helped her in significant ways. And I can imagine how that can help a lot of us in many ways. Speaking to other people is very important.
All right.
That's go
Thank
for
you.
it.
Thank you for those words of encouragement and support. Nicole, anything you would add as advice to someone looking to submit?
Sure. I will say first start by laying out a plan. Don't just start making your submission. Think about the amount of work you have done, the amount of graphics you have. And I think there's a certain amount of pages that you can submit, right? I think it's like 16 pages. So think how you're going to tell your story in the content that you can actually submit, and lay it out. And then, develop your plan. Think of faculty members that could help you within certain areas, and then start developing the graphics. And then don't just throw the graphics into the format. Just if you have to fix the graphics, fix them, because it takes some extra time, but at the end, I think that comes across when the jury is seeing your project, and everything it becomes more cohesive, more organized. And finally, I will say, as an advice, make sure through your narrative and to your graphics, you're somehow telling a story and you're telling your passion, So I think it's very important, because I imagine there's so many projects and so many good graphics, and, how are you going to stand out? Just try to, in your narrative, engage people and tell your story in a very passionate way, so they can engage and see the value of what you're doing and the importance of the project that you are proposing and how that project is beneficial.
All right.
And Daniel, just very quickly,
Yep.
On the narrative, I think most juries are averse to jargon-heavy narratives. So your project might be very particular because of what it's studying, but really work hard to make it so that it's easy to read and is not just so convoluted and so jargon specific that it puts your jury off. Tell a story, make it exciting, be passionate, like Nicole is talking about the topic. Make sure that your jury knows that, the idea is what's really valuable here, and jargon often gets in the way and makes it harder to get to the essence of it.
All right. Sound advice. We've got one more question from the audience we'll grab here, and then we're probably approaching the end of our hour. John says, I know there are several topics to submit to, or several categories, I think he's getting at there, but is there an overall theme, or would any of the panel hope or wish to see a theme, particularly relevant to the current climate? And I'm not sure if he means climate as in actual atmospheric climate or just the situations in the world today. But Makia, there's not an actual theme for the entire awards each year, right? They can submit anything.
Yeah, that's correct. You can submit really any topic or anything, again, tying into your interests, and what Nicole was talking about, find your passion. So, no, the jury is not looking for something to fit into a particular theme.
Okay. And
it would be a boring, I think it would be boring in a way. And part of the beauty of the awards is that you see a broad range of built work like Nathania's and, analysis and planning and design work. And that's really, whatever it is that you choose, make it the best you can make it.
all right. And just, did you see any common threads as a juror, Roberto, like maybe regarding climate change or things like that stand out?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that many schools are, and they should be looking at these really critical issues. So I think by very nature of how courses and studio problems are framed, a lot of the projects dealt with, big challenging issues. But at the same time, and those we recognized, but at the same time, that wasn't the only thing that we recognized. So again, it's about, I think that's part of the beauty of this discipline and this career, that we can write a doctorate on detail, how to build something, but we can also take that big picture and look at this larger idea, and larger challenges like, climate change. And still, it's part of the same thing, but you just have to express it and have the courage to go deep into it. And at the end of your submission, tell a story, tell a narrative, show it in a way that's really compelling. But there's no formula necessarily for scale or topic.
All right. And let's see, one last question, Makia. We've told them how to submit, when to submit, given them lots of advice. But if they do all of that, when do they find out if they won or not? When do we announce?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for the winner, we announced that shortly after the jury meets. So this year it would be sometime towards the end of June, we're looking at. Around that time estimated, and then everyone else also finds out around the same time frame. But the big announcement to the public doesn't happen this year until October. So we coincide with our special awards issue in LAM and the launch of the website, and that all gets announced later in the fall.
All right. And Nicole, how did you find out that you won? What did that feel like?
Oh, how did I find out that I won?
Mm-hmm.
They send you an email. So I got an email saying, when you submit, the project has a number. So I think the email had the project number, and I was like, I think this is from the ASLA. And so I got my email and it said, they explained your project was selected as an excellence award, and I was shocked. I was like, I can't believe this. I was actually in Puerto Rico. And I was like, I was very excited. I think it's just like I had like my 3 years of master's studies just in my eye for a second, like the hard work, like I feel like it paid off. So it was very exciting. I mean, I called everybody, obviously, and told everybody, like my family, some of my friends, because you can't make it public, I believe so, right, Makia? Until September, right? Or October.
Right.
So I obviously told my family, and it was a very exciting moment, obviously.
Awesome. All right. Well, believe it or not, that brings us to the top of the hour already. So I would like to thank all of my panelists for joining us today. Makia, Nathania, Nicole, Roberto, thank you all. Phenomenal job, and I'm sure very helpful to our viewers who are looking to participate in these student awards this year. So thank you all again for joining us, and thank you, our viewers, for joining us as well. We appreciate you supporting this ASLA Ask Me Anything brought to you by the Emerging Professionals Committee. And with that, we are going to sign off. Keep your eyes open and look for information on next month's Ask Me Anything event. We do these the third Wednesday of every month at 3 p.m. and we've got some great guests coming up for you. So keep your eyes out for announcements on that. And with that, we will sign off. Have a wonderful day. Thank you, everybody.